Happy Thanksgiving 2020, and whether you're able to gather with family in person, whether you'll connect over the phone, whether maybe even a family Zoom call or FaceTime, however it is, I hope that you're able to connect with family members, meaningful people in your life that you can celebrate Thanksgiving 2020. Many of us have seen the memes that have gone around on Facebook, other social media, and places that try to depict what 2020 is like. Early on, one that was posted and has been posted quite often since then is a big dumpster with flames coming out of it, saying that 2020 is literally a dumpster fire. I find myself actually laughing at some of these memes from time to time. But there's something about this attitude that's not really funny. While 2020 seems to have no end of challenges, is it really a dumpster fire? Really? Romans chapter 8 would seem to argue against that point of view, particularly verse 28, which reads, God makes all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purposes. When we combine that verse with 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 16 through 19, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances. For this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. Do not quench the Spirit. Friends, when we fail to give thanks in all things, we quench the Spirit of the living God. These memes and other attitudes might cause a chuckle, and yes, sometimes humor is a way of dealing with stress. Humor is a way of dealing with things, but I want us to dive a little bit deeper and think a little bit more seriously about these attitudes and how they reflect our attitude towards God, our attitude towards one another. It saddens me that I have heard some say we may not recite what we are thankful for in 2020. After all, there's nothing to be thankful for. Even in the most challenging of times of our lives are a reason to give thanks. And sometimes it is precisely for the challenges of our life that we have an opportunity to give thanks. There's an old Chinese proverb that goes like this. There was a man and a boy who owned a stallion, and it was their prized possession. And one day the stallion jumped out of their corral and ran away. And all the townspeople said to the man, "That's bad luck. That's unfortunate." To which he said, "Really? How do you know? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't." A few days later, the stallion came back with a wild mare. And they were able to be corralled, and the townspeople said, "That's great luck." He said, "Maybe it is, maybe it isn't." The man's boy was trying to tame the wild mare, and as he was trying to tame the mare, he was bucked off and he broke his arm. And all the townspeople said, "Oh, that's bad luck." He said, "Maybe it is, maybe it isn't." A few days later, a general came through the village and collected all the young able-bodied men to go off to war with the Mongols. The boy was left behind because of his broken arm. You see, the things that we sometimes think are good turn out to be bad. The things we think are bad turn out to be good. But in God's economy, in God's view, according to Romans and 1 Thessalonians and many other places in Scriptures, all things work together for good. It was late this last spring, and I was sitting around with the rest of my family around our Sunday dinner table, and we were all experiencing the spring that we had, and I looked at them and I said, "You know, really, we have a lot to be thankful for. We have a lot to give thanks over." Economically, we were still intact. We were able to continue my youngest son, his schooling from distance. My oldest son still had his job. My wife Lori and I, we still had our professions. And after all, we had had several months together that we never would have had. We had time together, more time preparing meals and going for walks. We had more time to sit around the table and share life together than we ever would have had. We had much to be thankful for. You see, we could have focused on other things. We could have focused on promotions and opportunities lost because of COVID. We could have focused on once-in-a-lifetime experiences that weren't going to be had because of COVID. We could have focused on the stress of jobs and a changed workplaces and lost opportunities and a sense of callings that couldn't be completely and fully lived out because of changed circumstances. For me, 2020 began with a life-threatening illness. We all have things in this past year that if we choose to focus on them, we could be despondent. I hope we all choose to focus on the things of God this Thanksgiving. To be able to dig a little bit deeper and say that no, 2020 is not a dumpster fire. I used to say and still do that God was green before we even knew green was a thing. God is the ultimate recycler. This Romans passage we read tells us that God can literally take the garbage of our life, the sin, the injustice, the things that are wrong, the disappointments. God can take those and use them for good, to fashion them into something else. Maybe the best and greatest example of all times of that is the cross of Jesus Christ. God takes the most vile act in all of human history, the most unjust act in all of human history. The only one who did not deserve such a condemnation on sin took condemnation on sin. Why? For our sake, so that we could have peace with God, so that all of the brokenness of our world might be reconciled to God. All things work together for good for those who wait upon the Lord and are called according to his purposes. This Thanksgiving may have more opportunity for deep, meaningful God opportunities for reflection and gratitude than any other year we've lived. Other years it might be easy. This year it might take us a little bit deeper reflection, a little bit deeper contemplation. But I urge each one of us, don't skip going around the table and expressing what it is we're thankful for this year. Because in so doing, we maybe will dive deeper into the nature and the character of God. And when we do that, we'll really have an opportunity to praise. We'll really have an opportunity for Thanksgiving. My prayer for each one of us is that we have a blessed and deeply meaningful Thanksgiving this year. Blessing to you and yours.